podcast. Man, this week we got UFC Columbus headlined again by heavyweights. This time we've got Blaydes taking on Chris Daukaus. Man, some other really good fights I'm interested in. Find some spots that we both like. We got Askar Askarov and Manon Farrow on this card. You know, both of them come out here with a good finish. Askar Askarov could be getting the next title shot. And, dude, Manon's going to put herself right there for a title challenging spot if she comes out here with a good win, too. Last week, I can't think of another fight night that has topped that one, to be honest, man. You had 9 of the 12 fights finish inside the distance, 7 in the first round. I know
was worth pay-per-view money.
Worth pay-per-view money. I tweeted out it felt like a pay-per-view as it was starting, you know. Topuria, Molly McCann, 2 of the most vicious knockouts I've seen, man. And then for Mikhaev and Patty to come through the way they did, just a solid night for both of us. We were successful in tipping out another cashing underdog for you guys. I know you gave out the Craig submission prop much higher than it ended up finishing at. And then, you know, Arnold Allen, we tipped out him in the co-main event. We thought he was going to win a decision and, man, went out there and absolutely torched Dan Hooker, showed why he's on that massive win streak he's got. And this is 2 weeks in a row, both of the best bets that we've given out cash. So giving out winners 2 weeks in a row. You see me stuck in the hat again, but, man, both in the green, and I can't complain.
Yeah, hard to complain with 2 weeks in a row where we're getting over 10 units combined. Taking a look at my fight card, like I said, maybe not the sharpest 6-unit parlay.
Sketchy for a minute.
One that was sketchy, but I was confident both guys would win. It was actually Topuria that ended up being the sketchier of the 2 legs, which I didn't expect. And then, like you said, the Craig by submission at plus 420 was probably my best hit. Almost a clean sweep if Topuria wouldn't have had those troubles in the first round, but he did end up getting the TKO, and I feel overall pretty good about the reads. Ended up the night plus 7.28 units with a 73% return on investment. Hard to complain right
Absolutely,
there. Man. Looking over at your card, another great card. The Arnold Allen is the one I want to point out. Like you said, you gave it as a tip earlier in the week. You got it at plus money, and he ended up looking like a minus 300. Then you take a look at the Patty Pimblett by sub round 1 at plus 650. You knew the submission was coming. Everybody was talking about the TKO. They thought he was a striker. But, you know, doing a little tape study, doing a little research, he's a submission first guy, and you hit that plus 650. It was a big one. I think the one that you're probably not feeling the most was probably the Pimblett and McKenna parlay. McKenna, even though you got a good line on her at minus 200, she just, it's low-level women's MMA.
No fight IQ.
Yeah, it bit you in the butt. But overall, you went positive plus 2.74 units with a 27% return on investment. And let's hope to keep the ball rolling next week.
Before we get started, if you guys haven't already, please do us a favor, like the video, and sub to the channel.
In our main event, we have 2 big boys in Blaydes versus Chris Daukaus. And hell, I'll never complain when we got 2 heavyweights in the main event. But as far as, you know, breaking this one down betting wise, I'd say it's pretty simple. We've got a striker versus wrestler matchup. Chris being the striker and Curtis being the wrestler. And from a betting standpoint, I think it's always the sharper option to go with the wrestler. And I don't think that this one's any different. Blaydes, you know, he's never been in a matchup in the UFC where money hasn't come in on him after opening odds. He's that gambling man's dream. You know exactly what's coming. And, you know, even if you stuff the first 2, he's going to continue to shoot for those takedowns. And we saw that in like the Volkov fight where he scored 25 takedowns in a single fight. That's 7 more times than the most Colby Covington has ever shot for on any given night. All that being said, Curtis does struggle with a certain type of fighter, and it's a power puncher. Thankfully, that's not really Daukaus here. Daukaus, you know, his speed will probably be his best weapon in this fight, but I doubt that he's going to knock him out with a one-punch KO. He does have 5 rounds to work with, though, and if Curtis does get tired, I think that there's some opportunities for him to open up. Ultimately, I think Curtis is going to get this done, though.
I'm on the same side, man, with Curtis. You know, number 8, number 4 fighter, big fight for the heavyweight division. Both victims of the Black Beast, you know. I'm glad that you kind of brought it up with Chris Daukaus. I don't really consider him that much of a power puncher either. You know, he's really light on his feet. He's got fast hands, but I think he's more of that volume puncher more than I would say power puncher. And while Curtis gets that, you know, flack for his chin, it's Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou that's knocked you out, man. That's, you know, the heavyweight champion and the guy with the most knockouts in the UFC. I wouldn't even say that Daukaus' power is on the same level of Rosenstruik, who Curtis Blaydes just fall, you know? And then when you go kind of look through the history of Chris Daukaus, I mean, he lost his fight, one fight before he won one to get into the UFC. It wasn't like he was on some massive win streak. He looked very gassed in round 2 before he got knocked out. Submitted by Sean Teed in Sean Teed's very first pro MMA fight. And then the chin of him, that's 3 knockouts for him. One of them just 3 months ago. Jumping back in, into another very tough matchup. And Curtis Blaydes. Curtis Blaydes got that very unique style for heavyweights. I can't really think of another heavyweight that wrestles the way he does and has proven to have the gas tank that he does either. Round 5 with Volkov, really about the only time it got sketched, but you just talked about how many takedowns he shoots for, and I said that exhausts a bantamweight for real, so no flack from me here. I think Curtis is continuing to improve on the feet. He looks to set up that really long jab. He has some calf kicks that he started to add in, and he trains out of Team Elevation. I think majority of these factors and aspects of MMA completely lead toward Curtis Blaydes. I've parlayed him. I expect him to get Chris Daukaus out of there.
And, you mentioned that Daukaus, he kind of is up in this top 10 division a little bit sooner than he should have. He was fast-tracked for sure, but I guess rightfully so. He's looked spectacular in those matchups that he's had in the UFC, but it's similar to Tai Tuivasa, where now he's going to, break that top 10. He's probably going to find some unfavorable matchups, especially when he's coming off of a loss. And, as far as stylistically, I think that this is clear-cut Curtis all day.
Very much fast-track to the top. I mean, Parker Porter coming off the couch. Nascimento definitely not proven to be the prospect people once thought he was. Was it Shamil? He's like, 43 and was on a 2-year layoff.
And Alexei Oleinik.
Exactly. So Blaydes just seen an undoubted much higher level of competition, has a much better gas tank, much better wrestling. Pinning a fluke knockout, Blaydes should take this one pretty easy.
You have to caution laying those heavy, chalky numbers on heavyweight MMA, though. We've seen it a blink of an eye. Minus 320 sounds good, but as Curtis shoots up, and he probably will continue, gets into those 450s, everything else, I'd probably start looking on the Daukaus KO sides because it is a possibility. It's one shot and it's lights out.
Laying chalk at heavyweights is tricky. In our co-main event, we have Joanne Wood taking on Alexa Grasso. I'm going to be honest with you, man. I probably could have picked a better co-main event for it, but I am excited to talk about this fight because I think we both got to play on this fight, Joanne Wood, long time training at a Syndicate MMA. I think she's the wife of head coach John Wood there. And for a long time, I gave that gym some flack for being a female gym, until all the fighters started moving to Vegas. So, man, she gets work with some very good names there. In this fight, I think these girls just resemble each other almost to a T. They're both primary strikers. They both struggled with the grappling in the past. In my opinion, I want to lead toward Grasso, who is, I think she is the better wrestler of the two, and I want to come to her defense more when fighting those grapplers because she's fighting Tatiana Suarez, Carla Esparza, some very good wrestlers. It's going to be a standing fight on the feet. I think I'm going to go with Grasso, who is a younger, faster, more agile. When I look over at the 37-year-old Joanne Wood, man, she does not look good and looked worst form of her career last time out.
I think that's completely accurate, everything that you said. I probably would have picked this fight for my fight of the night if we weren't already breaking it down. Alexa Grasso is my girl. I got a type, and she fits it, man. I feel like when I was looking at the stats for this fight, it can be a little bit misleading. Joanna on paper is the higher volume fighter, but that doesn't mean that you can assume that she'll be able to throw more strikes than Grasso here. I think that, like you said, this fight will probably primarily take place on the feet. And if I look down at Grasso's recent opponents, anytime that she's faced somebody where there isn't a threat of a takedown, she's absolutely styled on her opponents. In her 3 UFC fights where she hasn't given up a takedown, she's 9-0 in rounds, 30-27 in all 3, and that's against Heather Clark, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, and Ji Young Kim. And, speaking of volume, Grasso attempted 65 more strikes in her fight with Karolina Kowalkiewicz than Joanne has in any UFC fight that she's had. And then to talk about the striking types of these two, Joanne, she's going to need to get on the inside of Grasso's length to, land her Muay Thai strikes. And unless she's planning on teep kicking her for 15 minutes, I think Grasso's primary boxing will really be able to pick Joanna apart and keep her at distance. And then she's going to utilize that footwork to kind of circle off the cage. You mentioned her being 36, 37 years old, and you take those last two performances into account of Wood, and I think it's fair to say she's no longer in her prime. For her to win this fight right now at this stage in her career, I think she's going to need to add a new wrinkle to her game, which is doubtful at this point. I have put 2.5 units on Grasso at minus 210, and really the only reason why I've settled for that instead of like a 4 or 5 unit play is the likelihood that this does see the judges, and that'll always be a risk. Even if it does stay on the feet, I imagine the rounds to be kind of closer, only because Grasso doesn't have that power to really like appeal to the judges, so there might not be any clear moments where JoJo gets rocked, so you're kind of banking on these judges to understand who's winning boxing exchanges, and that's always a risk. But as far as I'm concerned, as long as this stays on the feet, Grasso should be a good play, and I expect another 30-27 from her here.
I wouldn't be shocked if she goes out there in 30-27s or either, man. When I look at JoJo, she really has not beaten much people worth noting, to be honest with you, and every time she takes a step up or she's fighting a girl of a good competition, she drops the ball, in my opinion. The last time out, I said she looked career worst, and I want to, it's Talia Santos who is now fighting Valentina. But if you want to look at Talia Santos, that girl's a decision machine, taking everybody down, landing 5 takedowns on Molly McCann, Roxy. She had 12 minutes of control time on Jillian Robertson, and she goes out there and styles on Joanne Wood, drops her twice pretty viciously. She doesn't get her head off the center line whatsoever. I know we've talked about how many right hands she ate from Jennifer Maia before she ended up, getting submitted. I don't like the striking defense whatsoever. I think that is heads and leaps and bounds better and favors Grasso, much more defensively sound. And again, I don't think wrestling's going to be mixed in here, but I think it favors Alexa Grasso here, man. I got her at minus 188, a little bit bigger of a tag. I haven't gone as heavy on her, but hearing your opinion on it makes me feel good.
My fight of the night is going to be David Dvorak versus Metheus Nicolau. I'm usually a flyweight hater, but I think this one is subject for a pretty good fight. Not necessarily that it's going to be an all-out banger war, but I do think that it's two upper tier 125ers, and they're going to showcase a pretty good skill set.
It's a great fight to discuss.
Nicolau, he's definitely someone that can fly under the radar with his performances. He's low volume, practically got cut from the UFC the first time for losing to David Ortiz.
It's 3-1.
I know. And since his UFC debut in 2015, he's had 4 straight decision wins in the octagon. All that being said, I think he's severely undervalued in this position. I understand people saying he's a boring fighter, but I think on that same token, he's also one of the most defensively sound fighters on the roster. When I watch some of the Dvorak tape, I see Dvorak liking to engage in firefights. He looks for the openings from his opponents to kind of land those powerful hooks and overhands inside the pocket. I just don't think he's going to get those opportunities here. And then, I take a look at the level of competition between these two, and it's night and day. Nicolau came into the UFC 7 years ago at 22 years old, fighting and beating the likes of John Moraga and Luis Smolka. And now we're seeing an even more developed 29-year-old version of him, still beating guys who we both hold in high regards in Tim Elliott and Manuel Kopp. I think you look over at the Dvorak side and you see a more fraudulent pre-UFC career than Ludovic Klein, man. His biggest win to pre-UFC came to Arsen Tagibov, who was 16-2 at the time, but didn't have a win over a single guy with more than 5 professional fights before fighting Dvorak. You look at his UFC wins. Juan Camilo Ronderes, who, Jordan Espinosa, 1-5 in his last fights, and Bruno Silva, who I guess we figured out isn't that bad, but I guess the qualifications for not being that bad are beating guys like JP Bays and Victor Rodriguez. I doubt Nicolau opens up enough to give Dvorak this firefight, and I know Nicolau is good enough to edge out those rounds on the judges' scorecards. We saw evidence of that in the Tim Elliott fight, where he showed high fight IQ by taking him down, holding him down, and winning, in my opinion, a clear 29-28. I think that getting him at underdog odds here, it's an auto bet for me, and I ended up putting 2.5 units on it.
I think it's an excellent fight to talk about. But not oftentimes am I going to just, completely be on the other side, man. Dvorak kind of been one of those guys that I think, might not have, the best looking resume and stuff coming over from the European scene, but I got to trust my gut when I think, that this guy is legit. I think he has real potential to be a top 10 flyweight, and on a 16-fight win streak, man, that's something hard for me to bet against. He's extremely well-rounded. He's got 8 KOs, 8 submissions. And I see, especially in the Espinoza fight, man, I saw a very patient, methodical approach. He was not willing to put himself in danger at all, was content to backing up the wrestler so he could see the shots coming. He had a just fantastic calf kick that, Jordan Espinoza had no answer for. And he was constantly just fating out, drawing out attempts from you. Well, on the side of Nicolau, he's just not as busy that I think Dvorak's going to be. But I'll give it to him, man. He's 5-1 in the UFC now, and in my opinion, never should have been cut the first place. It was just kind of at that time where if you were a flyweight and you're losing, they were debating on getting rid of the division, so they were cutting you. But man, off to, like you said, a good start, 2-0, beating Manel Kopp and Tim Elliott. The Tim Elliott one, he was bitching about it, but man, watching that back this week, that was just poor work by him and James Krause. James Krause tells him he's up 2 rounds going into the third. And when Nicolau shows that high fight IQ and takes him down in round 3, Tim did not even try one time to get off his back. And, I hate on him for it, but props to Nicolau as well, What I'd also like about Nicolau, you can tell he's at a Nova U now, man. He throws the same left hook to the body that Jose Aldo does, and it's perfect. It's a close one, but my pick's going to be Dvorak here. I know he's getting his first, real step up in competition, but I got to go with my gut. But at the same time, this is an easy pass for me, man. I'm having to lay some chalk on Dvorak, who hasn't, seen that level of competition yet, and it's probably, in my opinion, going to go the full 15 minutes. And yeah, Metheus has weaseled 2 out already, and like I said, it's going to be an easy pass for me.
So it is funny that we are just disagreeing on it this much, but yeah, like I said, I got to take the underdog stab when we do think that this fight is going to be close. Mm-hmm. Even if it was 50-50, I think it's plus EV going with Nicolau. But yeah, this makes 2 fights where I'm laying 2.5 units, and I see them both going to the judges. So I could end up on the bad end of the stick, come Saturday. But I'm pretty confident in Metheus Nicolau here.
I like it. There's probably some better actual fights on the card, man. But for my fight of the night, I could not leave out Matt Brown and Bryan Barberena, 2 of the guys that are absolutely just there to brawl and nothing else, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And I would be highly shocked if this went the full 15 minutes with the durability we've seen of both guys just going down the toilet lately. Matt Brown, he's been finished in 3 of his last 4 losses, but particularly lately he's been pretty good. With the benefit of some generous matchmaking, Diego Sanchez, Ben Saunders, pretty chinny if you ask me. Mm-hmm. Diego Lima, a bit chinny at the same time, and he was losing that fight. The one prospect that they threw him in there was Miguel Baeza, and if you remember in round 1, he hurt Miguel Baeza bad and stuff before Baeza ended up knocking him out. Man, I like Matt Brown's forward pressure. He's not going to be one that has his back against the cage, and I'm hoping that he brings an absolute slugfest to Barberena. And doesn't decide to wrestle him because, man, lately Barberena has just had, no answer for the wrestling. Anthony Ivy took him down 5 times. Jason Witt, who's a good wrestler, but took him down 8 times, even dropped him on the feet. Darian Weeks came in there on short notice, took round 1 off of him, landed 4 takedowns. For a guy, the same can be said for Matt Brown, but mainly for Barberena. He relied on that durability so much to win fights, and to see that go down the drain after he took that shit kicking from Luke and Randy Brown, he just has not looked the same to me. Now, I'm gonna pick Matt Brown, but am I overly excited to back a 41-year-old who has shown the same lack of durability lately? Hell no. And so just like the David Dvorak and the fight we just talked about, I think it's an easy pass here for both of these guys. Matt Brown, I do believe, is from Ohio, so he's going to be in his home state. He's on the main card. Man, I'm expecting like I said, an all-out brawl, never in a boring fight. I think Matt Brown has that wrestling advantage that he might have to go to if it gets tricky. So, going to go with Matt Brown just because of the form I've seen Bryan Barberena in lately. But man, I think this is an absolute coin flip.
Funny enough, we both picked the 2 fights that are the most close lined on the card, and I'm going with Bryan Barberena right here. It's kind of odd like that, but you talked about Bryan Barberena, his durability kind of being questionable at this point. I still think he's got it, man. Like, when you look at the Vicente Luque fight and the Randy Brown fight, he's taken 3 rounds of beatings in both of those before he actually, succumbs to that pressure. And personally, I think Matt Brown does need like a one-punch KO to get it done. And I think that he probably won't be able to get it done inside the distance. I think that Bryan Barberena is kind of being overlooked here. Like, he has been fighting the better competition. We've,
3 of the top 5 welterweights, I'm pretty sure.
3 of the top 5 welterweights, and you look at Matt Brown's competition, you talked about him catching Miguel Baeza. We've kind of figured out Miguel Baeza is a little bit of a fraud.
And a little chinny, too.
And a little bit chinny. So, and Carlos Condit, it's just not the level of competition I want to see. And the performances that he has been being put on, I don't think it justifies him being a pick'ems against Bryan Barberena, who will, in my opinion, probably edge this out 60% of the time, maybe. I'm going with Bryan Barberena, but it's more of a fade on Matt Brown.
I did bet Matt Brown the first time around when they were originally matched up, and looking at it this time around, again, I've just completely laid off, man. Durability of both of these guys completely up in the air, and it could potentially just be an absolute shit show.
And probably the best move just to lay off this fight and enjoy the violence. Now moving on to our fighter to watch section. It's hard not to keep an eye on this girl, Manon Fiorot. I've kind of had the same question about Manon Fiorot's game since she's entered the UFC, and that's, can she stop takedowns from a legit grappler? I thought after the Bueno Silva fight that we would have had that question answered, but no. Turns out Bueno Silva watched Manon Fiorot's highlight tape, and she was like, yeah, I can stand with her. She got absolutely styled on, shaking off all the hard punches, but it looked awful. Yeah. After doing a little bit more research, I'm less confident than I initially was that Maia was going to get this to the mat. But I am confident that she's smart enough to at least try to get this to the mat. In both of her matchups against Chookagian and Valentina, she at least attempted takedowns against far superior strikers, which tells me she knows the right game plan regardless of if it's successful. And, hell, if, and that's a big if, she is successful, we've seen her ability to keep that fight on the mat against the highest level in Valentina Shevchenko. On the feet, which this most likely will take place, it's a different story. Maia's kind of slow. She's kind of flat-footed, doesn't have the cleanest technique, and will probably eat a bunch of good punches to the face before finding any success closing that distance on Manon. Manon has incredibly strong hips, paired with some good footwork, and usually keeps her opponents at that striking range. I think that she definitely has the skill set to make easy work of Maia, but this will be probably her first true test in the UFC. Yeah. So to see her at, minus, where are we? Minus 450 against a title challenger. Yeah. It's tough not to look at Maia plus 350 and not want to take a little stab on it.
I'm with you, man. I'm glad you highlighted Manon Fiorot, because we cashed that plus 200 on her inside the distance against Victoria Leonardo in her debut. She's been a girl that I've really had my eyes on as well, and I don't want to jump the gun and say she's Valentina Shevchenko, man, but when you look at these two girls strike, I think she is just as talented almost as Valentina on the feet. But you brought up a good point, is that we've not seen her tested against a legit grappler, and maybe even a legit contender in the division, title challenger in Jennifer Maia. So I think you highlighted a perfect person to talk about.
And in such a wide open division, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, this is her opportunity to kind of show that she's earned a title shot.
Yeah, finish here, and she could be next in line for Valentina, absolutely. For me, my fighter to watch, another person with the finish very well could see themselves in title contention. I'm going to pick Askar Askarov taking on Kaikar France on Saturday. This one could have easily been the co-main event. This one very well could have even been the main event, if you want my honest opinion. Kaikar France is coming off his vicious knockout of Cody Garbrandt. I know the first punch that knocked him down, all fine and dandy, but that combination he hit him with, the finish, was filthy. With Askar, he's making him number 6 in the world now. Askar Askarov, he's number 2, and I believe that's for a good reason, man. I think the UFC and Dana White, they're hesitant to make that 4th fight between Figueiredo and Moreno, because if Askar comes out here in styles, I think he's the next title challenger for Figgy. Since joining the UFC, straight to the big guys of the division, there was really, no litmus test for this guy. Debuts against Brandon Moreno, who was the eventual champ. Next 3 fights, Tim Elliott, cementing himself as a damn good veteran. Just proved he can beat Ulanbekov, and can wrestle with the best. Pantoja, who I think has solidified himself as probably a top 3 or 4 in the division as well. Joe B was definitely on the way out, but Joe B is like a 3 or 4 time title challenger as well, and has been a staple of the division forever. And he's looked phenomenal in these. He grew up in the ACB regional scene over in Russia, where he fought some good talent before coming over here as well. Was finishing all of those talents on the regional scene, and he's yet to get that one, in the UFC. But he's got such that just the fighting style that you want, that's made for success in the wrestling. We've seen Kai Kara-France held on his back by Bontarin, submitted by Brandon Royval, wrestled by Brandon Moreno. And so I think the wrestling path is 100% there for Askarov. And I won't be shocked if we finally get a fantastic number on his submission prop or something, and he goes out there and submits Kai Kara-France.
I love that take. I think something about Kai Kara-France that people don't bring up enough is he's small for this division, Askarov, with that wrestling ability, I do think that he gets him to the ground easy. And like you said, that submission is live as could be. So great guy to highlight. And like you said, big spot for him to showcase his skills and kind of put him on the map. We're moving on to the underdog section of our podcast. And for me, I don't see a lot of dogs barking this week, man. Breaking down the Dvorak Nicolau fight for my fight of the night, I got so sucked into the side of Nicolau that he actually has become my dog of the week. I've kind of already talked about the reasons why, but just to reiterate, I think that he's at a different point in his career at this point, and he is going to kind of prove that Dvorak's record's a little bit more padded than people like to think, and I think that he gets a 30-27 victory here.
Nice. I'm leaning toward that other side there, but, I told you that's my fight that I can pass on. So for the reputation of the podcast, I hope you catch that one.
Thank you.
For me, man, I really did think I was going to be on an island with this one, and looking at, I think some people are kind of on the boat with Sarah McMahon as well. The girl's been wrestling for 25 years now. She is an Olympic silver medalist, multiple-time world medalist. Tatiana Suarez is up there, but Sarah McMahon may legit be the best female wrestler that we've seen come through the UFC. She's been around the sport forever. She challenged Ronda Rousey back in 2014 for the belt. I talked about it with Matt Brown at 41 years old. Sure, the age is a little bit of concern. But she's got such an experience edge on Rosa. Her losses come to legitimately the best names in women's history. Ronda Rousey, Miesha Tate, Amanda Nunes. I really thought she looked career best against Lena Landsberg, and I thought she was following that performance up against Juliana Pena. Round 1, as clear a day for Sarah McMahon as it was. Round 2, I don't necessarily agree with Juliana Pena winning that round by strikes off her back, but I personally had that 2-0 going into the round 3 with Sarah McMahon. On the judges' scorecards, it was 1-1, and she did let her gas tank, go round 3, and that is a concern. But you got to look at, who was she grappling with, man? She's grappling with Juliana Pena, who's a legit black belt, a champion now, a legit fighter. She was throwing up submission attempts, striking off her back, and I think that aided to the gassing of Sarah McMahon, because if you go watch the Lena Landsberg fight, that gas tank in round 3 is perfectly fine, man. Rosa has given me zero indication that she can wrestle with somebody of McCann's caliber. One submission record, or one submission win. She's lost twice by submission to far less superior wrestlers. And when I look at her, I put no stock into wrestling Jocelyn Edwards. That's how you beat Jocelyn Edwards. Well, we can look down at the rest. Betch Correa, no longer in the promotion. Vanessa Mello, no longer in the promotion. Laura Procopio, no longer in the promotion. She is not fought anybody to come in here and deserve to be this big of a favorite. I love to back a wrestler. I got her at plus 185, so even at 41 years old, man, I think she's super live, and I think her plus 550 sub prop is even super live.
So, I can see where you're coming from with the Sarah McMahon as the underdog. I personally think that, because you mentioned her gas tank, that's a big one for me. It's hard to just look past it, and at 41, it's not going to get any better. It's concerning that in the times where she is forced to wrestle more than she's used to, that's what gasses her. You would think that maybe she'd lose those fights by getting outstruck or something, but she's her own worst enemy, and I think that's what holds me off of it. But I do agree with you that Carol Rosa has never seen that level of wrestling, and she's likely to get put on her back for 3 rounds here.
Yeah, I mean, I know for a fact Sarah McMahon is not coming in here to strike with nobody. She's coming here to force the takedowns, and yeah, I think she's super live at plus 185, and hopefully we give you 2 cash underdogs this week.
Moving on to our prop bet of the podcast, I got to go with the boa constrictor here, man. Dude's got 46 submission wins on his record, and he's fighting a guy that's more than likely going to try and get this fight to the mat. Right now, there's only one book that has it open, and it's Bet Online. They have Olynyk by submission opened at plus 400. It's now at plus 350. If FanDuel comes around here at in a couple of days and opens up a prop bet at plus 400 or better on Olynyk by submission, I think it's very similar to the Paul Craig by submission last week, where the method of victory for this guy, and if you can get those type of odds on it, I think it's worth a 0.5 unit stab. So for me, my underdog play or prop bet is Olynyk by submission.
I don't hate the number. Don't necessarily agree that it's going to happen. My prop bet, going to go with Blaydes inside the distance. For a massive favorite, you could get this at anywhere between like minus 110 and minus 145 on the books that are out right now. Broke down the main event for you pretty good already, man, so I don't really think I need to go into too much detail in here. Daukaus moves well for a heavyweight, but I'm very hesitant to lump him in with the elite of the division where I have Curtis Blaydes at. I don't necessarily rate his power on the same level of Francis Ngannou of Derek Lewis. The knockout is not much of a concern for me here, even though it is heavyweights. I think Curtis Blaydes has potential to, maybe even win on the feet. Shamil Abdurakhimov was tagging Daukaus on the feet with that left hook, probably even took round 1 from him. Blaydes is ever improving on the feet, but he doesn't let his fights play out on the feet, man. He's going to take Daukaus down. I think he's going to exhaust him by round 2. I think each time he latches up with him, Daukaus is just going to go down easier and easier and easier. I think Blaydes is going to get that finish in probably rounds 3 or 4.
Moving on to our best bet segment of the podcast, and I'm going to have to go with my girl, Alexa Grasso. I think that she's absolutely got the edge on the feet. There's 2 different types of strikers, and Alexa Grasso is the much cleaner, much more technical one of the 2. I think that she has the ability to out-volume her, to land at a better percentage, and to just land the more damaging shots of the 2 girls. Win the fight. When there's no threat of the takedown for Alexa Grasso, she absolutely dominates. We saw that in her last fight where she gave up 7 inches of reach to Ji Young Kim in a stand-up fight, and she's still able to 30-27 her. I don't think that this one's going to be any different. So Alexa Grasso all the way up to minus 250. Honestly, I'd be comfortable playing her here.
I think she's a great bet, man. I think, like you said, this is a striker's delight type of fight, and I think you got the twice as defensively sound, the twice better boxer, the much younger. The one on the rise versus the one that's on the decline right now. Best bet for me, I'm going to go opposite of your prop bet. I think Ilir Latifi, man, his money line, I got on that pretty early. I've got 3 units riding on it, and I honestly expect that to close pretty close to about minus 200 before fight time. He was a longtime training partner of Gus and Hamzat over in Sweden, but when you look online now, the guy's moved to Vegas, it looks like. He's constantly getting rounds with Francis Ngannou, Corey Anderson, Magomed Ankalaev just a couple weeks ago. And since moving up to heavyweight, it's kind of been all over the place, It's like he got screwed over in Houston, and it's like, we were there live. He definitely deserved that win over Derek Lewis. That was some home cooking. He controlled Derek Lewis on the mat all 3 rounds for more than half the round. I don't know what else you need to do to win a fight, But then the Tanner Boser one, he gets the nod in that one, and it's like, I don't know if he really deserved that one. It came down to how you scored round 1, which was a very, very difficult round to score watching that one back. But, there's a case he could be 2-0 here at heavyweight, and I think he's got a pretty generous matchup, to be honest with you. He comes in at 250 pounds. He actually is not small for a heavyweight. And then look at Olynyk, who's came in at 227 pounds in 3 of his last 4 fights, showing that maybe that age is catching up to him, or maybe he's not really, a heavyweight, and he was just making a living off being able to take these guys down and choke them out. And it does worry me a little bit because Latifi is a wrestler, and, he could very well give Alexei those openings. But you've seen Alexei try to pull off the scarf chokes, the Ezekiel chokes, the neck cranks, and similar to Derek Lewis, man, it's hard to choke one of those guys that don't have a neck. And so he's got plenty of submissions to his will, man. But I think a lot of Latifi is going to be able to stay safe from a lot of those. And then when it comes to the feet, I mean, Latifi, I think, has got the better boxing. It's pretty sneaky. He's got the power advantage, and the durability of Alexei is down the shitter, man. He's been finished in 5 of his last 6 losses. There's also, potentially rides into a decision win, kind of similar to Sergey Spivak. So I haven't taken him inside the distance, and I've just laid 3 units on Latifi money line.
Stylistically, I think you're right. Ilir should roll here. And like you said, as far as Alexei Oleinik, that magical pull-off submission has kind of fizzled out the later he goes on into his career. But the Ilir Latifi not being a true heavyweight, it worries me in all of his future matchups. But like you said, Alexei himself isn't the biggest heavyweight, so even though he's 6'2", he's still going to be outweighed here. Will probably get bullied on the mat, but always that submission threat.
And that's why I was comfortable laying 3 units, because I thought I was going to get like a plus 200 sub for Oleinik, and that fact that it's open in plus 400 and plus 350, and it's a perfect hedge opportunity, even though I'm not one to typically go back and do that. That's a hedge I'm making on Saturday.
100%. Now for our quick pick segment of the podcast, we'll start off with the first fight on the card, which is Luis Saldana versus Bruno Souza. I'm going to go with Saldana here. I think he's got the better stand-up game, and I think that he should probably edge this out, although I didn't really do my due diligence on that.
I think I'm with you, man. I think Saldana does have the bit cleaner stand-up here, the more activity, and probably takes this one too. Next fight that should not be this low, Nicolau versus Dvorak. Wonder how you lean here.
Yeah, I'm leaning Nicolau here. I know we kind of are head-to-head on this one, but I think Nicolau is the rightful side, and to get him at underdog odds, it's a must.
Yeah, I am on Dvorak, but I'm not laying the juice on Dvorak here. I think it's an easy fight for me to pass on, since I'm not getting plus money on Dvorak.
Moving on, we have Jennifer Maia versus Manon Fiorot. How you see this one going?
Man, first real legit test for Manon Fiorot, but I think she passes it. I'm going to go with Manon.
I think I agree. I'd like to see her get upset, but I do think that Manon rolls here.
What about Kizriev versus Tululin? I know Tululin's stepping in kind of on short notice here.
Everybody really likes Kizriev, so I guess I'm going to go with him until I see evidence or hear evidence on why I shouldn't.
Yeah, man, he's a nasty Russian wrestler. Always sticks to the game plan. I think he goes in there and probably gets a submission win too.
All right, and then moving on, we have Chris Gutierrez, a popular dog this week, versus Dana Batchduri. How do you see this one?
I got a 1-unit shot on Dana early in the week. I honestly thought the line was going to go the other way. I thought money was going to come on him. I don't think Chris looked very good in his last fight, and Dana has looked sensational lately.
I couldn't agree more. I'm also on the Dana side. I haven't yet placed a bet, but I think that's the rightful side.
Moving up on the prelims, McCann versus Rosa. I told you why I like McMahon, plus 185 for an Olympic caliber wrestler when Rosa has not faced that yet. I'll take that all day.
I'm on the Rosa side. I think her winning her last 4 fights by decision is actually an edge in this matchup that'll probably see the judges. I think that she'll have the gas tank later on. So I'll go with Rosa, but I understand any McCann underdog stabs. Then we go to, arguably one of the better fights of the night. And Neil Magny versus Max Payne Griffin. Who you got there?
Got a 2.5 unit shot on Magny. I got him underneath minus 200, minus 188. It's one of those where Magny has been facing the best of the division lately now. I think he's getting a guy who's on his own run of his own, but I still think there's a level difference here. Magny by decision.
Yeah, Griffin's kind of been given a favorable matchups in the past 4 fights, and I think Magny's kind of gotten the opposite. He's always been on the shit end of the stick with his matchups, and I think this one is actually in his favor finally.
Me too, man. Kicking off the main card, super good fight, honestly, man. Mark DeCasey versus Slava Borishev. Who you got?
I would like Slava to show me a little bit more to kind of prove that he's that upper echelon. I wanted to bet DeCasey as an underdog this week, but ultimately I can't find a reason to, so I'm going to go Slava. One
of those where I think Slava's in great form right now, looking to be the first fighter with 2 wins this year, and DeCasey, man, coming off that layoff, did not look good against Alves, was getting touched up, ended up getting dropped and submitted. I'm going to go with Slava Borishev, man.
Nice, I like it. In our second fight on the main card, we've got Ilir Latifi taking on Alexei Oleinik. How do you see that one?
Easy, 3-unit Latifi, man. I think he's got him covered everywhere.
My head says Latifi. My heart says Olynyk. I want Olynyk by sub, but I do think Latifi will probably get it done.
And then moving on to the meat, man, one of the big fights at flyweight, Askar Askarov and Karkar France. Askarov, man, phenomenal wrestler. I think a finish here could very well propel him into a title challenging spot.
Yeah, I think Askarov can come in here and absolutely bully Kara France. Take another one of those city kickboxers down. Then we go on to Matt Brown versus Bryan Barberena, two OGs of the game. I'm probably going to lean to the Bryan Barberena side, as I think he's got a couple more miles left on him than Matt Brown does.
And I could very well see that, man. And I don't know if Matt Brown is going to be the wrestler that has been the people who've taken Barberena down, but then again, it's like Anthony Ivy, So Matt Brown very well could wrestle here, but I hope this is a stand and bang type of fight, and give me the hometown guy, Matt Brown.
I like it.
Co-main event, Wood versus Grasso. I think we're both pretty high on Alexa Grasso.
I'll never pick against my girl Grasso.
Yes, sir.
Then for the main event, Curtis Blaydes versus Chris Daukaus.
Blaydes inside the distance. This is one of those cases where I don't think Daukaus is, again, ready for the elite of the division.
Blaydes should roll. Hate the -400.
I'm with you, man. Hate laying that chalk at heavyweight. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Hopefully we get tip out some more winning bets for you guys this week, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.